Good morning, everyone. We've still got a couple of people joining us this morning, but we'll get started with the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, so the full recording will be made available to anybody who is only able to join a little later. So as I say, good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Vicky Ferguson. I'm the Unit Manager within the MHRA Devices Regulatory Group. And today we will provide you an overview of our consultation on the future regulation of medical devices in the UK, which was launched on the 16th of September. This is a chance for you to ask questions to clarify both what is being asked in the consultation and how you can respond to the consultation. I would like to stress that this is not a forum for sharing views on what the answers to the consultation questions should be. However, we do strongly encourage people to submit a response to the consultation. Today's session is aimed at patients and the wider public, and I'd like to introduce you to some of my colleagues who will be assisting with the presentation alongside me today. First of all, we have Lizzie Fusey.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Lizzie Fussey, and I'm a regulatory policy advisor with the MHRA.
And we have Jalan Hussain.
Hi everyone, my name is Jalan Hussain and I'm a Senior Regulatory Policy Manager in the Devices Regulatory Policy Group at MHRA.
Before we start today, I'd like to run through some of the logistics for the webinar. We expect the webinar to run for around 60 minutes. The material we'll present is based on the medical devices consultation, which is published on the gov.uk website. We'll start by giving an overview of the consultation, letting you know what it covers and how to respond. This should take around 30 minutes, and it will be followed by a Q&A session. You can submit questions throughout the webinar using Slido, and we'll cover how you can do this shortly. Many of you will have already submitted questions as part of your registration for the webinar. We will answer some of those questions first, and then we will take questions that you submit today. We will focus on answering questions seeking clarification on the content of the consultation and on how to respond to the consultation. If you have a question that has not been answered during the webinar, we recommend getting in touch with us using the contact details given at the bottom of this slide. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available on our gov.uk page in around 2 weeks' time. The recording will not include the Q&A session, and that is to protect the participants' privacy. Live captioning is not running during today's webinar. However, captioning will be included in the recording of the webinar. After today's webinar, you will be sent a survey and a link to where you can find the slides and the recording of today's events. As I've mentioned, you'll be able to submit questions throughout the webinar today using Slido, and you can do that anonymously if you prefer. Questions submitted will be moderated by our team to be addressed where possible during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Participants will be able to see and like questions that the moderators have released for discussion, allowing us to answer the most popular questions first. Please focus your questions on clarifications required to support you in responding to the consultation, as we won't be able to answer general regulatory questions or provide MHRA views on the topics covered on the consultation, and these won't be approved for view by our moderators. As noted previously, if you feel at the end of the session that your question has not been answered, please do send it through to the consultation mailbox shown on this slide. I will now briefly run through how to use Slido. When you go to the Slido webpage, you'll notice a blue box at the top of the screen. If you enter the code #MHRADEV14 OCT and press the blue arrow, this will take you to today's questions page. You can type your question into the box here and press the enter key to submit it. Our moderators will then review your question, and if it is accepted, it will be sent to the live viewing screen on Slido, where other attendees can view it. These questions will be shown on screen during the Q&A session later in the webinar. As previously noted, the purpose of today's webinar is to give an overview of the Medical Devices Regulation Consultation, which launched on the 16th of September and is accessible from the gov.uk website. In terms of what we'll cover, we'll start by giving an introduction to medical devices, what they are and how they're regulated in the UK. We will then set out the background to the consultation, how we've arrived at this point, and why we're planning to change our regulations. We will then go on to highlight the overall aims of the consultation, setting out what it is that we want to achieve. We provide a brief overview of the topics that we're consulting on. Next, we'll provide some practical guidance on how to access and respond to the consultation via the online survey. And in that section, we'll run through some hints and tips to support you in responding to the survey. Finally, we'll move on to the Q&A session, starting with the pre-submitted questions before moving on to answer the questions that have been submitted through Slido today. I'll now hand you over to Lizzie, who will cover the next section of the presentation.
Thank you, Vicky. Good morning, everyone. So to start things off, I'm going to give a quick overview of what we mean by medical devices, just to ensure that we all have a shared understanding. Essentially, a medical device is a product for diagnosing, preventing, monitoring, or treating disease or injury. We all come across medical devices in our everyday lives. They include a wide range of products, from hearing aids to walking sticks, to insulin pumps, pacemakers, plasters, and thermometers, to name just a few. And increasingly, software is being used to diagnose and monitor medical conditions. This includes some apps and computer programs. In the consultation, we refer to two main types of medical device: general medical devices and in vitro diagnostic medical devices, which are referred to as IVDs. An IVD is a medical device used for testing samples, such as blood taken from the human body. These samples are then tested outside of the human body to help diagnose illnesses or monitor patients with a known health condition. For example, a COVID-19 test kit would be classed as an IVD. And then we have general medical devices, which are other device types that are usually used in or on the human body. Examples include plasters, spectacles, and pacemakers. Because so many of us use and rely on medical devices, it's important that they are regulated appropriately so that they are as safe as possible and work as intended. Next, I'll cover medical device classification. General medical devices are split up into 4 classes of increasing levels of risk. Rules on how this works are set out in the medical devices regulations. We start with class 1, which is the lowest risk. This includes devices like medicine spoons, spectacle frames, and standard plasters. We then increase to class 2A, which includes products such as short-term corrective contact lenses and standard hearing aids, before we move on to class 2B. This includes devices like apnea monitors, ventilators, and surgical lasers. Lastly, we have the highest risk category, category 3. This includes implantable devices like pacemakers and breast implants. Currently, to be sold in the UK, devices must bear a UKCA or CE marking. This is a mark to show they meet the necessary safety requirements. For low-risk Class 1 devices, usually the manufacturer can self-declare that their devices meet the requirements and affix a UKCA or CE marking to their device so that they can place it on the market. With higher-risk devices, like Class 2A, 2B, and Class 3, the manufacturer must use a third party to check that their devices meet the regulatory requirements. For UKCA marking, a UK-approved body must be used, and for CE marking, an EU-notified body must be used. Approved bodies and notified bodies are privately run companies who carry out checks and testing of medical devices to make sure that they meet the required safety standards. Most medical devices must then be registered with the MHRA before they can be sold in the UK. The way that we classify IVDs is slightly different. IVDs are classified into 4 groups in order of increasing risk, with rules again set out in the medical devices regulations on this. We start with general IVDs, which are the lowest risk. For example, blood collection tubes and urine sample containers. Next, we move on to self-test. These are used at home by members of the public, such as home pregnancy tests. And then we have List B devices. These are IVDs used for detection of illnesses such as chlamydia, or devices for evaluating Down syndrome risk, or home blood glucose testing. And lastly, List A covers the highest risk IVDs, which diagnose illnesses such as HIV infection. As with general medical devices, the manufacturers of general IVDs can self-declare conformity to the relevant regulations. For higher risk IVDs, a UK approved body or EU notified body is required, depending on whether the device is being UKCA or CA marked. As with general devices, most IVDs must be registered with the MHRA before they can be sold in the UK. So I'll now run through the key organisations involved in the regulation of medical devices and how a product moves through the system before it reaches healthcare professionals and patients. Underpinning our system is the need to ensure that when devices reach patients and members of the public, they are as safe as possible and work as intended. To do this, manufacturers and other people involved in supplying medical devices must meet the requirements set out in the medical device regulations. UK responsible persons act on behalf of non-UK manufacturers so that if there is a problem with a device, the MHRA has a UK point of contact to help resolve it. As previously mentioned, UK approved bodies assess higher risk devices to ensure that they conform to the relevant standards, which means that higher risk devices receive greater scrutiny than low risk devices. And the MHRA is the regulator for all medical devices in the UK. We do not have a role in approving medical devices, but we designate, audit and oversee approved bodies, manage the device regulation system and conduct market surveillance to ensure that devices on our market are safe and that action is taken where issues are identified. So we'll move now to the consultation. In terms of geographic coverage of the consultation, it covers the whole of the UK, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. We welcome views on alignment of medical device regulation across all of the UK nations as a part of this consultation. Please note that the UK government has recently proposed a change in the UK's agreement with the EU on Northern Ireland, meaning that goods meet either UK or EU rules could be sold on and used within Northern Ireland. This slide provides an overview of how devices are currently regulated. The UK Medical Device Regulations 2002 continue to govern medical devices placed on the Great Britain market. In Northern Ireland, EU laws are still followed. For general medical devices, that is the Medical Device Regulations 2007, and for IVDs, it's the in vitro diagnostic directives. A medical device must have a UKCA mark or CE marking before it can be put on the Great Britain market. There are very few exceptions to this rule. Under the current rules, medical device on the Northern Ireland market needs a CE marking. A UKCA marking shows the medical device meets the requirements of UK medical devices and regulations when used as intended and works properly and is acceptably safe. A CE marking shows that a medical device meets the relevant EU rules. CE marking on medical devices will be recognised in Great Britain until the 30th of June 2023. And then from the 1st of July 2023, a UKCA mark will be needed. The Medicines and Medical Devices Act 2001 has introduced powers to amend our medical device regulations. So we now have an opportunity to develop a more robust future system for medical devices. With fast-paced developments in health tech and lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that how devices are regulated can make a big difference for patients, developers and the wider public. So this really is a pivotal point for medical device regulation in the UK. So now that brings me to the aims of the consultation we're discussing today. We now have an opportunity to create world-leading regime that prioritises patient safety while encouraging innovation, including streamlining the approval of medical devices. We know this can have a real impact on people's lives, and we all want to trust that the devices we use are safe and effective. We want to ensure that all devices have the right level of scrutiny and that we can effectively and swiftly identify and respond to an issue with a device if it does arise. We want to see a system that helps ensure patient safety, not only of those using a device, but also wider public health, which we all have an interest in. And we want to ensure that the UK remains an attractive destination for businesses involved in researching, manufacturing and supplying medical devices. We're also mindful of the need for international collaboration, and we want to ensure that we take into account best practice. We want to see a system that is more open and transparent and has patients at its heart, while being flexible and open to innovation. And we also want a system that is proportionate, with devices being subject to review relative to the level of risk they pose, while not unduly deterring device developers with compliance costs. So let's take a look at the key timescales and milestones here. The consultation is a key step in our work to develop a more robust regime. It follows recent reviews, notably the recent review led by Baroness Cumberledge, which have highlighted how problems with medical devices such as surgical mesh can have a significant impact on people's lives. It also follows early informal discussions we held this year with a range of different stakeholders, from patients to trade associations, to approved bodies and clinicians, to inform our early thinking on where the opportunities are. The consultation will close on the 25th of November, and we encourage as many people as possible to respond. We will be analysing responses throughout this year with a view for publishing a government response early next year and laying regulations for a future regime to come into force on in July 2023. There's been some interest in the extent to which we have engaged with international regulators and the NHS in developing the consultation. Throughout this process, we have engaged with other government departments, the devolved nations, patient representative groups, clinicians, and trade associations. We'll continue to engage with these groups after the consultation closes as we move to the next phase of our legislation. We're really keen that this approach is informed by a wide range of views and would encourage both the NHS and international regulators to respond. So those are our key aims, and now we have covered the background to the consultation, I'll hand over to Jalan, who will talk you through the topics covered in the consultation and how to respond.
Thank you, Lizzie. Over the next few slides, I will provide a high-level overview of the consultation chapters. The consultation is split into 17 chapters, and you can complete a response via the online survey. Before beginning the survey, you will have the opportunity to select which specific chapters you would like to respond to. So, for example, if your key interest is in implantable devices, you can select chapter 11 and will only see questions relevant to this topic. There is a summary of each chapter on the gov.uk website to help you determine which chapters are relevant to you, and I will quickly run through them now. I will start by giving an overview of chapters 1 to 8, which are the core cross-cutting chapters. Next slide, please. Thanks. Chapter 1 covers the scope of our regulations. So, for example, it looks at whether we could broaden the range of products regulated as medical devices. This could include, for example, products that are not designed for medical device use but have a similar function, such as cosmetic contact lenses and dermal fillers. Chapter 2 considers how the classification of medical devices could change. So, for example, moving all implantable devices into the highest risk category so that they are regulated more strictly. Chapter 3 covers the role of organizations working within the medical device industry to bring products to market, such as manufacturers, importers, and distributors. These are otherwise known as economic operators. This chapter looks at how the regulation could be updated to improve patient safety by strengthening the duties of economic operators. It also considers whether we should introduce requirements for medical devices manufactured and used in-house by a health institution, such as a hospital, and whether health institutions should be exempt from meeting certain regulatory requirements. Chapter 4 covers the process for registering a device with the MHRA and how devices could be identified with a unique device identifier. And just to help clarify, a unique device identifier is a unique code, often referred to as a UDI, that enables identification of a specific medical device on the market. This code is created through a globally accepted device identification coding standard. Chapter 5 considers requirements for approved bodies who assess whether higher risk medical devices meet the regulatory requirements. This chapter also sets out more detailed requirements for approved bodies to drive improvements in their operation. And it also covers how we could make the process through which the MHRA appoints and regulates approved bodies more transparent and rigorous. Chapter 6 covers how medical devices are assessed before they reach our market to ensure they are safe and perform as intended. Next, thank you. So moving on swiftly, Chapter 7 covers requirements relating to clinical investigations and performance studies. Manufacturers must be able to support claims about how their medical device will perform in order to help verify its safety and performance. And so this chapter looks at tightening some of those requirements to help improve patient safety. Chapter 8 covers post-market surveillance and vigilance. In broad terms, this is about how the MHRA and manufacturers monitor devices' performance once it is placed on the market, and how they respond if a problem arises. And so possible changes include, firstly, clarifying the requirements for reporting of serious incidents to the MHRA. Secondly, also looking at requiring manufacturers to report all types of incidents, whether serious or otherwise, to the MHRA. And also, thirdly, looking at requiring manufacturers to consult with patients and the public when investigating issues relating to medical devices. The next set of chapters are product specific, and I'll provide a brief summary. Chapter 9 covers possible changes to how IVDs are regulated, such as amending the IVD classification so that more devices receive approved body oversight, and making changes to genetic testing requirements. Chapter 10 covers the use of software as a medical device. It invites feedback on a number of issues, such as how we should define software and how these devices in particular should be classified. Chapter 11 covers implantable devices, which are often associated with invasive procedures, long-term use, and complex removal procedures, making them high-risk products. This chapter considers expanding the scope of regulation to include temporarily implanted devices, up-classifying certain implantable devices, and the introduction of more controlled access policies for implantable medical devices. Chapter 12 covers other product-specific changes, for example, possible requirements for remanufacturing of single-use devices. This chapter also covers requirements for custom-made devices, including technical documentation and post-market surveillance. The next set of chapters again cover more cross-cutting themes, which I'll now summarize. Chapter 13 covers environmental sustainability and public health impacts. This chapter considers how a future system for medical devices could help drive more environmentally sustainable practices in manufacturing, usage and disposal. Chapter 14 covers possible alternative routes to market, which could provide manufacturers with the opportunity to access alternative routes to launch new products onto the UK market. Chapter 15 looks at transitional arrangements and considers how we may implement all of the potential changes as smoothly as possible. And as part of this, how we can support industry as they move across to the new regulatory system. Chapter 16 is an opportunity to provide further feedback on the level of ambition set out in the consultation. And finally, we have Chapter 17. This is an important chapter aimed at members of the public and users of medical devices, as well as people who may have lower levels of technical experience or less time to respond to the survey. We appreciate the consultation is quite lengthy and technical, so if you are pressed for time, we would encourage you to complete Chapter 17, and we would very much welcome your views. You can complete Chapter 17 by itself or in combination with other chapters you are interested in. Chapter 17 includes questions on all areas of the consultation other than chapters 5 and 6 on approved bodies and conformity assessments, as this is a highly technical area, but you can respond to these chapters in addition to Chapter 17 if you have an interest in these topics. So that was an overview of the key topics covered within the consultation. It is also important to be clear on what is not covered in this consultation. Some key exclusions to note are: the consultation does not cover changes to the MHRA's operational processes. Designated standards are also outside of the scope of this consultation, but will be an important consideration as the future regime develops. Common specifications are also out of scope. These would set out technical, clinical requirements a device must meet. We do not have the regulatory powers to make separate regulations to create common specifications. However, such requirements could be detailed in regulations themselves or in schedules dealing with specific device types of medical devices. Other areas that are excluded include medicines, expert panels, reference laboratories, and medical device coordination groups. So I will now briefly cover how to respond to the consultation. The consultation is hosted by Social Optics through their online platform. Just to note, when you click the link on the gov.uk landing page, it will take you through to their external site to complete the survey. If you'd prefer to read through the questions as a whole before responding to the survey, you can download a copy of each chapter from the gov.uk landing page. When you are ready to move through the Social Optics platform, you will initially be asked to provide some information about you or your organisation. If there are any questions that you do not wish to answer, there is a prefer not to say option. Following this, you will be shown a list of chapters. Here you can select all of the chapters you would like to offer a response on and then click Next. You will then be presented with each selected chapter in turn, showing background information and corresponding questions. You do not have to answer all questions if they do not apply to you. Each time you click Next at the end of a page, your response to the consultation so far will be saved. If you wish to take a break and return to the consultation later, you can do this by copying the URL address in your browser. You can then use that address to pick up where you left off. You can do this as many times as you need until you press Submit at the end of the consultation. When you press Submit, your response will be closed and submitted to the MHRA. You will not be able to edit or resubmit your responses after this point. When answering the consultation, you will see 4 options at the bottom of your screen, which are circled here. Once you have entered your personal details and selected your chapters, you can move between chapters and review your answers at any time by clicking Show All Sections. You can also access the overview of contents, glossary, and appendix from these links. Once you've clicked Show All Sections, you will see a list of all of the sections you've selected to respond to. From there, you can click into any chapter and answer or edit previous answers. If you would like to respond to additional sections at any point, you can do this by returning to the areas of the consultation page and navigating from there. Just be sure to click Next at the bottom of the page before moving on to another section to ensure your answers are saved. If you wish to edit any of the responses you have given, you can do this at any time before you press Submit. So before we move on to the Q&A section, I would like to recap on key steps. The consultation will remain live until 11:45 p.m. on the 25th of November. Once we have received all of the data, our team will review, collate and analyse responses and summarise the findings. We will then publish a government response to the consultation. We will reflect these findings in our work to develop secondary legislation that will update our regulations.
I'd just like to highlight one final time that the consultation is now live. We're pulling back up the previous slide deck to give you the information that you need to respond. So the consultation documents can be found on gov.uk, and we've got a link to that on the Eventbrite pages for today's event. Just as a reminder, the consultation closes at 11:45 p.m. on the 25th of November. If you have any further questions which haven't been answered today, please send those over to the mailbox, which is showing on the screen here on the bottom line. You can also find that address on the gov.uk page for the consultation, should you need to look it up. And again, as a final reminder, a recording of the webinar will be made available on our gov.uk page shortly, we expect within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. On behalf of all of our presenters and all of the team working on the Slido questions in the background, thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.